and welcome to the latest episode of the Built Environment Marketing Show, hosted by me, Io Abbas. If you want to find out more about me and my work, head to www.abbasmarketing.com and you can see all that I do in terms of strategic marketing, speaking and training for built environment firms. Today's episode is an interesting one. It came about last minute, which is some of the best stuff that I do, I guess. I had an email drop into my inbox from Rachael Bernstone, who is based in Perth in Western Australia. She's another architecture marketer and communicator just like me, and I love her stuff. Anyway, she had actually drafted an amazing email, which I'll put a link to in the show notes, all about, is marketing a dirty word in your architecture firm? And it's one of those kind of emails that made my ears prick up. And she wrote a really thoughtful, deep, incisive piece about her views on this, where this came from, and I guess what kind of architects are missing by not taking marketing seriously. So anyway, so when I had that email land, I thought, I'm going to drop her a line and see if she'd like to come onto the show, which is what this interview is. I hope you enjoy it. Take care. Bye. Hi, Rachael. Thank you so much for coming onto the show. Can you introduce yourself and what you do at Sounds Like Design?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here. So I'm Rachael Bernstone. I'm the founder of a comms consultancy for architects called Sounds Like Design. And I have been an architecture journalist for close to 25 years. So I came into the role that I'm doing now via media and publishing. I also have a master's in architecture history and theory, although I don't have an architecture undergraduate degree. I've got a journalism undergraduate degree, so I'm a bit of a rare beast.
I'm like, I've got none of that. I've got a business degree. That's it. That's who I am. You know what I mean? I'm like, I'm not an architect. I'm always like, I'm not an architect. I can't do it.
Yeah. So I don't think of myself as an architect, but I certainly can speak the language of architects. And especially because I've been writing stories about them for such a long time, I've absorbed a lot of knowledge and information, by osmosis, which has been really helpful in terms of me framing ideas about now how to help architects with their business development and marketing. So I set up my business 10 years ago to do that, to do consulting. And I've been working with clients directly, and then in 2020, before COVID hit, I'd already decided to create an online course, and the timing of the pandemic and everyone going online actually worked in favour of doing more delivery online. And so I've been helping architects with compulsory professional development training since 2020, and I have a range of courses and workshops that I offer.
Awesome. Do you do stuff in the UK or mainly in Australia?
So my CPD, the compulsory professional development, that's only for Australian architects, but the principles and the ideas and the strategies are global.
Of course they are.
Yeah, an architect in the UK probably would get a lot of benefit out of my materials, but they wouldn't earn the CE or the CPD points.
Awesome. So anyway, the reason that I invited you onto the show was basically because an email landed in my inbox, which was literally yesterday. And it had a great subject title, and I read it and I was like, you've got to come on. So this is where we are now, which, within like 24 hours, that's pretty quick even for me. So what was the title of your email? First of all, I'm going to ask you to explain.
The title was, Is Marketing a Dirty Word in Your Architecture Practice?
Is it?
In my experience, mostly, yes, it is. Most architects that I speak with are very reluctant to engage in marketing in a proactive way, and that means that they don't devote a lot of time or energy or effort or money to marketing.
Why do you think that is?
There's a long list of reasons.
Apart from they hate us.
Yeah, I don't think they hate us personally. They hate the idea, and it's instilled very early in their university education. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is there aren't usually clients in university studios or other types of university study. So architects are talking among themselves with their teachers and sometimes with visiting critics or jurors, and they're not necessarily having to create messaging or information for a non-specialist audience. So there's an insider language issue going on. And another thing I think that stems from that early university experience is that when architects stand up to present their work to the class and to the visiting critic or juror, in many cases, and definitely in the past and hopefully not so much anymore, they were prepared to have shreds torn off them, to be critiqued in a way that felt very personal and uncomfortable in some cases. And often this was happening after they'd been up all night, so they hadn't had a lot of sleep and they'd been working on their scheme, you know, right up until the time they were presenting. So they weren't in the best frame of mind to begin with. And then the way the critique was delivered was really soul-destroying in a lot of cases.
I've heard people talk about the process and you're just like, how can that be part of the education process, especially education process which should really be building young people up?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I'm not saying not like hyping them up to a level that is not realistic, but I do think there is a way to deliver things. And yeah, some of the crit processes I've heard described, I think that's quite, you hear them quite talked about on, you know, TikTok and stuff. And I'm like, that does not sound like something. I know you're paying for it, right? You're paying for the experience to be flogged.
Absolutely. Yes.
Right?
Yeah. And I think that has a lasting effect for people, whether they experienced a crit like that themselves or just witnessed a peer go through that treatment. I think it has a lasting effect on their psyche. And another issue that comes out of that experience is that they're visibly asked to defend the work. And so that's a combative type of communication dynamic. And so when we as marketers or storytellers come into practices, you know, 10, 15, 20 years later and say, let's unpack the story and get it out to a wider audience, whether they are aware of this or not, there's a part of them that shrinks and contracts because of those early experiences that were uncomfortable or even worse, in some cases, traumatic. So I think that a lot of the antipathy towards marketing and us as marketers comes from those early experiences. And sometimes I'm not even sure that architects are aware of those links.
I guess it's that having to defend they're having to defend their craft, right? In a very public setting and be open to scrutiny, which is, I can imagine that's a lot. And then also if I'm coming to you and saying, what's the story behind this project and why have you done it? And you're like, so you want me to put that out there so I could be critiqued again?
Exactly.
Like,
yeah.
And I guess a lot of marketing, especially the free stuff, you can't control the message, right?
Yes.
You're putting things out into the world and then people can react on
and letting it go.
Yeah, that's hard. Yeah. I'm not very good at letting it go. Let it go. But there is that whole thing though, isn't there, where you go, actually, I can imagine it's quite exposing.
Yes, it is. It is. And it takes practice. If you've had a negative experience, it takes practice to get into a frame of mind where that becomes something that you look forward to and that becomes positive. And you need some positive flow-on consequences from that in order for you to have a different point of view around whether or not that's worthwhile.
And how far do you think this kind of resistance to marketing or the concept of marketing actually goes into practices? Do you think it's most practices or do you think it's like the vast majority or?
Yeah, I think it's a lot. So I decided to become a consultant and to offer services to architects because as a journalist, I had seen firsthand when I went into a practice to ask questions to write a story for a magazine article, how much resistance there was around sharing and how little skill there was in being able to frame a story for me as the journalist and to understand what the key important lessons or takeaways or things that they wanted to present, in what is usually a distillation of something that might have taken 2, 3, 10 years in some cases to gestate and be realised. So I could see as a journalist asking questions that there was a lack of skill in that communication side of things, and I wanted to provide some upskilling around that because stories are a very useful way to get a point across.
Yeah. And it's a skill for life, right? It applies across whatever you do as well. I think it's so
Absolutely.
important. And in your email, what do you think marketing is, and what do you think architects think marketing is?
So I think architects think marketing is the devil. And to me, it's much more simple than that. It's very straightforward. They just need to make it easy for their future clients, whoever they are, to find them, contact them, trust them, engage them, and then refer them. Because we know from the Institute's Client Insights report that 71% of clients want a referral from a trusted source when they're looking for an architect. And so referrals and word of mouth are still king when it comes to finding the right types of clients to bring in the right types of projects.
That's amazing. I mean, do you think, I guess for me, I don't think people look at it in that holistic way. And what I find interesting is it's trying to tell the stories behind photographs. It's trying to tell, actually how you made all of those decisions. Because I always think a completed project is like a lost opportunity. Does that make sense? Because I always look at it and just think, if you've not shared how you got there, then that is an opportunity that you've lost. Because people don't realise, like, oh, it's just a white wall, right? It's like, no, it's not just a white wall. Do you know all the stuff? Do you know how many colours of white there are? But it could be stuff like that. And I think that's where people don't realise it's like those stories are what people are paying you for. Do you want to explain more about what's in the email? So in terms of some of the kind of concepts you think and why, but also what people can do to, I guess, get more on board with marketing?
I think a lot of architects are operating out of survival mode, particularly at the moment when the Middle East war has had a pretty detrimental impact on confidence and the economy and construction and a client's willingness to proceed with a project. It was a bit of a jittery moment. We seem to be coming off the back of that in Australia. I'm not sure how that is in the UK at the moment, but things have been difficult for about 12 months, and that made them worse again. So architects have noticed drops in revenues. We're seeing that from research that's coming out of the profession here in Australia. And that has shown that there is a two-speed architecture economy happening. Some architects are doing very well, and some have had to put off staff and they don't have enough work. And to me, the difference between those two types of practices is that the ones who are doing well had marketing and business development strategies in place before this latest hiccup, and they were able to ride it out more easily. So I think that these economic situations have created a perception within the architecture profession that there are systemic issues that they don't have any control over. In the UK, for example, there's this ongoing conversation around protection of title and protection of function. And we have a similar conversation playing out in Australia in different forms. And that's forcing architects to try to prove their legitimacy. So when you're fighting for survival with government regulators in that way, it's very hard to think about how you're going to market your firm and win your next job, because you're basically just trying to keep the lights on. Architects get stuck in this cycle of thinking, oh, all of these systemic issues are working against me, and, I've got all these threats coming at me from different directions, AI, climate emergency.
Insurance costs. Yeah.
Exactly, all of those things. And it's very easy to get caught up in that vortex and feel like there's nothing you can do. You're absolutely trapped and there's no way out. What I would say to architects, and what I said in the email, is that you actually have agency, because those systemic issues, everybody's operating under the same constraints, if you like. But within those constraints, you've got a lot of agency in terms of how you choose to respond, and whether you choose to be passive and wait for clients to come and find you, or whether you choose to be proactive and create messaging to attract the clients that you actually want to work with. Those are two very different approaches. And they fall within the remit of individual choices that you're making in your business or in your practice. And so there are systemic issues, and you can do advocacy around those, and you can try and shake things up, and you can lobby the government for certain outcomes, knowing that those things are going to happen at a glacial pace. And you can make changes within your own business and practice to set yourself up to thrive, even though all of those systemic issues are pretty confounding.
I think you're absolutely right. I think there is this thing of, I think people, I often talk to some of my marketing mates, and we're always going, people are like, oh, we don't do politics here. We don't need to. And you're there going, I don't think you can be in business and ignore politics, right? And I think politics is part of everyone's business and our world, and we're all dealing with uncertainty. And I think we have to kind of throw that into our mix of that kind of external forces we can't ignore. But you're right, is that what can we do to shape it in a way that will work for our business is one part. I know when I've worked in-house, we used to do a lot of, even like 10, 12 years ago, I used to work with companies, and they realised that they needed to start doing public affairs and talking to government and shaping the packages of work that are coming through, those big packages, and contributing to those consultations, because it meant that you were shaping that future work, and also that you were raising your profile and visibility of being a trusted advisor at that level. So that kind of, then you do a sandwich effect where you'd work from the bottom level, but you'd also work from the top level. And I think that kind of stuff is, small practices can contribute and have something to say and position themselves and look where the opportunities are coming. Because a lot of these big public sector programs, they have to be open and transparent. All the information's there. You can read it. You can read how much housing they want to build in the borough or area in the next 10, 15 years and what the vision is, and understand what they're trying to do and tap into that in what you do in your marketing. And I think it's just a case of people don't realise that there is actually a lot out there that you can kind of look at, understand, and do your kind of optioneering scenario planning of where you want to take your business. So on that strategic level, but also from a marketing level, then you go, what activities will help us to win that work in the future or now or whatever. And I think that agency, I don't think people realise. And I think we've probably gone from a state where a lot of firms were used to work just walking through the door. They should just be in the press. We should just come out. I'd be listed in the back, and that's what architects would do. They would look for other engineers, and then they'd just find us. That doesn't happen anymore. There's a lot more competition.
No, things have really changed.
Really changed. And also I think marketing's moving faster than ever. And I think
yes, I agree.
And especially with the age of AI, people are catching people up pretty quickly. So it's like, how are you going to keep iterating and keeping ahead? And I think people don't realise that as well. It's like, I might have worked 2 years ago, but now got to try something else. And I think that can also be quite scary as well. But
it can. It's really destabilising having to constantly reinvent and experiment and try something new because the thing that worked 2 years ago is no longer working.
But that's the world.
Absolutely. And that's destabilising.
Yeah. But the thing is, it's like, you can't even say, oh, it's just marketing. It's like, no, that is the world. Like, if you sat with a crystal ball and said, oh, there's going to be a war in the Middle East, you'd be like, what?
Yeah, totally. That came out of nowhere, didn't it?
Literally out of one man's mind. But I do think it is that thing now, but we are in a constant, I always think now we're always in a time of uncertainty and flux. And that is what we're all having to deal with. But that is kind of the norm now.
Yes.
Yeah. So
it is.
No. So in terms of agency, what kind of things do you think the firms who are succeeding, what are they doing?
I had an interesting conversation with someone who won an award last year, and a significant award for a project. And that was something that they'd looked forward to hopefully winning one day. And they were disappointed that there wasn't any marketing or exposure off the back of that they didn't get articles in the newspaper or magazines or any calls from clients asking them about it. And that was interesting to me because I've got a client who won an award last week, similar significant award, and we had put together a package of materials that would go out on the Monday morning after winning the award on the Friday to absolutely make hay around the fact that they'd won this award.
It's a hook.
So, Yeah, absolutely. It's a way to open a conversation and to hopefully get some media coverage off the back of it. And I think that architects fall into the trap of thinking that winning an award is the be all and end all, and then the work will come flooding through the door, like you were saying. And that might have been the case years ago. I think it's questionable whether it really did happen or not, but it might have happened more than it does now. And now you have to use the award as the stepping stone to make your own opportunities from that. So that's,
and as a way to start conversations.
Yes, yeah. So that's an interesting difference. Another thing that I would say, a client that I've worked with, we defined a term to describe a project that they had done some R&D and were very innovative on. So we coined a term that it was a true net zero home. And I did some research and we discovered that it was the third true net zero home. And by true net zero, we mean net zero in both operational and embodied energy. And so we found two previous examples of houses that met that definition. And so we said that this was the third in Australia and the first here where I am in Western Australia in the state. And so it's really interesting to see that a lot of the coverage of that project, which is very innovative and at the frontier, has mentioned very early on in the media coverage that it's the third true net zero project in the country, because that's a significant benchmark. And so we created a frame, if you like, to be able to present this project. And we made that a key plank of the way we talked about it. And then nearly every article repeats that. And so that's how you build authority and thought leadership, is by creating a story or framing a story about a project that differentiates you from what everyone else is doing. And you can do that with any project, because every project has its own unique qualities and attributes that are of interest to your future clients. So it's a matter of being able to identify, a couple of those important qualities and then making them the hook, like you said, and building the story and the narrative around that particular element, rather than how architects traditionally told stories, which was around aesthetics and how things look and function.
And that's a big shift, isn't it? And I think you're absolutely right. And what I love about that true net zero thing is that it's third party endorsement. So like you'll have articles appearing which aren't just you saying it, but you've got other magazines and publications.
Absolutely.
And actually that's where AI is citing from. It'll be from those publications.
Yes.
So actually they'll be coming up for that term in searches. So if anyone puts that into like ChatGPT or whatever, they'll be the first people talked about. And I think it's that kind of looking at it in that kind of integrated way, or integrated communications way of like, actually, if we do this properly, this can feed into other channels and how we work. And then you could do articles on your website. So you kind of look at it in that way and you go, actually, those are things that we can stand out from the competition. And I think those little niches are where you're going to win.
Yeah. Another thing that client did was we created a lead magnet. So you know what a lead magnet is, I'm sure, but perhaps some of our listeners don't. So that's a piece of valuable information that you put on your website and you invite people to download it in exchange for giving their email address. And so we created a lead magnet where he defined the 5 key criteria that he'd used in the R&D on that project. And he wanted to share that information with clients and with other architects. He wanted to make that freely available for other people to take those lessons. And so when he's done podcasts, he talks about this lead magnet that people can come and download from his website. And that also endorses him as a thought leader, because he's now authoring this important information which is helping others and making that available to people. And that is a form of marketing.
Oh, completely. And building his own mailing list. Because you're getting people's details, which means you can then market to them. And I think it's that kind of whole, the whole wheel, isn't it? The whole circle of like, actually, this is all the things we can do to guess, drive business. And that's basically what he's doing, but just for a different way. That's really important. And I think for me, the thing about marketing now is that it's so interconnected. And I don't think people realise that. It's like, you can't just get in the media and that's it. It's like, no, how's it going to work on our website? How will it work in our social media? How will it work in emails? And I think there is a lot to do. But actually, if you start to look at it in that way, then you make a lot more impact.
Yes.
Hi, it's Io here. Most firms only call in outside help when things go wrong. And I think they're missing a trick because they're already behind. The firms I see making real progress and consistent progress when it comes to marketing, they've got strategic thinking in their corner all year round and not just when times are bad. Anyway, that's why I've built a strategic advisory offer. So you can have me in your corner. And there are 2 ways to work with me. So a quarterly advisory service, marketing advisory service, where you would have 4 90-minute sessions with me across the year. So you bring your challenges, I bring my brain of 25 years of working in this sector, and you leave with a clear kind of 1-page action plan on what you should be doing next. And also, if you've already got a plan, it could be a good way of getting clarity on what you need to do to move forward in the next quarter as well. There's also a more ongoing service if you want me in your corner, every couple of months or every month, which is a strategic advisory service. Both of them give you access to my rather large mind, and they're also a way for your firm to stay ahead and be ahead of the curve so that you kind of are always thinking of the bigger picture and not just doing, I guess, marketing that's just implementation. So yeah, there's a link in the comments if you want to find out more about my strategic advisory services. When it comes to architecture firms and them taking marketing seriously, what makes them do that? Or is there normally a crunch point where people go, Rachel, you've got to help us? Or
there are a lot of reasons that people might come to me. There's not one specific thing that stands out. So in some cases, I'm hearing people say now, I've noticed that things that used to work aren't working. So I need some help to understand what to do next. In some cases, people are wanting to update their website and they're not quite sure what the important things they should focus on around a website upgrade are. So they're coming to me to ask for help with that. Sometimes it's I won an award or I got my thing published and it didn't have the beneficial effect that I was hoping for. So what am I missing? Like, what do I not understand about marketing? Because I thought that was going to be the thing that would have people, ringing me and the phone going off the hook.
It still amazes me that people still think that. Anyway, but go on.
Yeah. Well, I think that because architects are they don't have a good grounding in marketing. And actually there's a very simple and straightforward reason for that. So in Australia, architects are taught according to the National Standard of Competency for Architects, which is the curriculum, essentially. And that document was last updated across a period from about 2020 to 2022. And in December 2020, there was a draft put out for public consultation, and they had a new professional competency, which was PC13, and it was around including business development and marketing as part of the curriculum. And I was jumping up and down and waving my hands and writing about it on my blog and, screaming from the rooftops. It's coming. Don't worry. The saviour is on the way. And then it didn't get through to the final version. So it fell out in the review process. And there's several reasons for that that I've been able to unearth. One is that they had to update a couple of other major topics in the 2022 version, and it was seen to be too much change. So it didn't make it through for that reason. But another very important reason, and it's relevant for the UK, is that we in Australia have mutual recognition of qualifications with 7 countries, including the UK, the US, Japan, Canada, New Zealand, Singapore. And so if we make a change to our curriculum, there needs to be a corresponding line item in every other of those mutual recognition countries. And that's why we're in this situation where architects all around the world are lacking these pretty significant skills around business development and marketing because they've never been in the curriculum, and it's very hard to introduce them as a new topic because of that mutual recognition framework that exists.
Gosh, that's a big thing that needs to change, isn't it? Especially as it's a massive change, because you kind of sit there and think, without it, their practices are not going to survive. And that kind of fundamental running a business stuff is probably some of the most important skills that a lot of practices don't have.
Yes,
and
I agree.
It's not even just marketing. It's all of those kind of so-called kind of softer disciplines. But it's so fundamental.
Absolutely. Especially, I think it's even more critical now. And this brings us to another important point that relates to the email that I sent. So architecture is going through a period of redefinition. And I think that we're making a significant shift from the former model where the client was a patron, and architects, especially in the residential sector, created homes for, 5 to 6% of the population, people who were well off and could afford to commission a bespoke piece of architecture. Now we're moving into an era where architecture is more of an essential service because of climate emergency, housing crisis, the drive towards diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging. All of those factors mean that it's become apparent that architecture is now for everybody. Access to good design, in my opinion, is an equity issue in the age of climate emergency, because we're all going to be impacted by changes to the climate, and we all need to have our homes retrofitted so that we're more comfortable and resilient, and so that we reduce our impact on the planet. In Australia, that's 8 million homes that need to be retrofitted, and we are a long way behind the UK, which has at least some government policies around retrofitting.
Yeah, we do, but we've got a huge challenge as well, and how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
But I guess it's social infrastructure, basically. That's what we're designing now, right? Social infrastructure.
Yes.
And I think it's a very different beast.
Yes. And so that means that rather than clients being patrons who've got, who are well-heeled and able to engage in a process of almost creating a work of art that they can live in, architects are now thinking about how to serve a much wider proportion of the population. And that involves changing the way they position what architecture is, who it's for, and who should benefit. And so I call this transition the shift from client as patron to client as customer. It's an entirely different beast.
And in some ways, what kind of attitudes would we have to shift as an industry to do that?
Absolutely. Yeah, because we're not any longer talking to people about aesthetics and marble and, multiple rooms. We're talking about doing more with less, and rooms that perform double and triple functions, and reducing our impact on the environment. It's a different conversation. The budgets are different. And that means that the way that the services have to be framed and delivered and costed is also different, because the same amount of thinking and expertise goes into a small budget little renovation project as goes into a high-end, high-budget home. And so, we are going to be building less because of climate emergency and because of planetary limits. And so in an environment where architects' fees are pegged to the value of construction, everything is up for new discussion when we shift to the different model.
It's an interesting time, isn't it? And you're right. I think it's interesting as well. I think the way people buy services now has completely changed as well. And I think even because I was looking at some of your stuff on your website and things, and I was like, actually, the way you sell your services is different. And there is I'm going to probably do a mini series at some point on different ways like architects can sell their services, because I think a lot of people think it has to be the full end-to-end service. It's like, well, people don't really want that now. I've now got architects who are going, oh, we just go in and we do site appraisal and we'll tell you what's possible on that site, and we'll just come with you to that site and help you, Mr. Developer or Miss Developer. You know what I mean? And I think those kind of little, small, discrete things that really help someone get the most value from their acquisition and what they're doing, and you become their trusted advisor, so that when the work does come, and I think there's a different way of selling that. And I think people aren't necessarily realizing that there are different ways to do things now. And I think, and that's a way of differentiating yourself again. You know what I mean? Of like, actually, our services, you can procure what you need. We only give you this. You doesn't have to be a full end to end. But I do think that's another mindset and kind of shift, isn't it?
Yes. I had an interesting piece of feedback from a client recently. We did a positioning workshop together last year, and then he made some changes to his website. And one of those changes was to add a services page, and most architects do not have a services page on their website. And so he put up a services page, and he said he got a call from someone who he had never spoken with before, and they were doing their due diligence and research to appoint an architect. And they liked what they saw on his website because he was the only architect that they'd looked at who offered feasibility. And so they wanted someone to come and tell them what was possible, how much it might cost, and whether or not it would be approved by the local authority. And so the fact that he had that on his website was the reason that they picked up the phone and called him, because every other architect that they were looking at didn't have that entry service. So I call those gateway services because they're the gateway to larger services. And I think this comes back to the conversation we were having earlier about the systemic issues and the individual issues. So there's all sorts of sort of prohibitions, if you like, on full versus partial services. So insurance companies would prefer that architects delivered only full services. And there are codes of conduct that say that architects should be prioritising full services over partial services. But as you said, the way that consumers want to engage with service providers is really changing. They want the ability to test the waters and to see if you're a good fit and if your ideas make sense before they're willing to commit to a full service project from the get-go.
But not only that, they also want to scope out whether the project's got potential. So I could look at a site and think, oh, I could do this. But actually, if I go and get a specialist who can come onto site and actually tell me what is properly possible, what the council's likely to approve, all that kind of stuff, that's way more valuable, because then at least I'm going into like scoping out a project, but with like the proper information and, proper professional advice. So I'm not wasting time and money putting together a deal that would never actually get out of the ground. And I think that's what's valuable, is that actually you providing those types of services, and they don't always have to be free. I know some people do this stuff for free, but you could still get paid for it. And I think it's just finding those different ways of actually being supportive. And I just think that we all want to kind of buy in different ways. And I think, looking at, there are some architects who do like online services now and things like that. And we've got like Resi, who are based not too far from me in Southwest London, but, there are not a lot of online services and things. And you think they've looked at the model of architecture, what doesn't work, and then they built something else. And I think those things are useful. And you kind of think that's really where the market is going. Like it or not, we've got more digital buyers. The people who are procuring now are, they're digital natives, and they're the ones who are going to have the money, and they're going to buy in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess final question. If you were in an architecture firm and you weren't sure how to get started in marketing, what would your advice be to them?
So this is interesting. I have a quiz that architects have completed, and I logged into it the other day, and 200 architects have completed the quiz. So there's some really good data in there. And one of the final questions is, what do you need? Do you need more time, better strategy, more money? And there's a fourth option, I can't remember what it is. But the overwhelming response, 59%, better strategy.
Really?
So architects, really, yeah.
I am so surprised.
Yeah. So architects you were talking about the wheel before, and you've got publishing and awards, and you've got social media, and you've got maybe an email newsletter, although architects are not using those to a great degree. So architects are bamboozled by the number of things they could be doing, and they don't know what they should be doing. And so I go back to data. So I said at the beginning that the Client Insights report told us that 71% of clients want a referral from a trusted source. So have you collected feedback and reviews and testimonials from your past clients that you can use in your marketing messaging across all of your channels and in your fee proposals and your capability statements as a form of social proof? That's a place that people could start. And then on this question of strategy, I actually created a marketing system for architects because I wanted to be able to present them with a hierarchy of which channels are the most beneficial. So I've said, okay, there are 6 channels, and the most important channels are referrals, email, and your website.
Ooh.
And so that means that social media and publishing and awards, which are the ones that most architects focus on, are of lesser importance in my hierarchy.
I'm going to ask you questions on that because I'm quite like, really? How did you get to that?
Well, in terms of the referral, elevating that to the number 1, that came first anecdotally because my clients were saying to me, we get most of our work through word of mouth. And some cases it's 70, 80, 90%. So that's a sort of accepted wisdom within architecture practices that word of mouth is responsible for a lot of new projects. And this is obviously based on historical data prior to the arrival of social media. But in fact, it still holds true. And so most architects, when you talk to them now, they say, oh yeah, referrals still very important. So that's a very untapped channel that architects are not making the most of, and that their clients are voting with their feet by wanting to have that one-to-one direct recommendation from somebody who's actually used the practice before. Because, buying architecture or procuring architecture, totally different order of magnitude to buying a handbag or a pair of shoes. Very low risk buying a pair of shoes. They don't fit. They were £100. You put them in the bin. You haven't lost much. You go down the wrong path with a bad fit architect, it's thousands and thousands of pounds and a lot of heartache and time, which is valuable. So having a recommendation from someone who's had a good experience still carries a lot of weight.
Yeah, I do. I guess I slightly differ on that. I think the referrals is one thing, but I also do think your supporting kind of digital infrastructure now has to be good especially because I think people are doing the research more. I do think digital natives who don't talk to people, I am one of them, and I'll happily research for days for anything I'm buying, right? And that includes design, you know what I mean? So I kind of do my own, and so I do think it's both now. Because yes. I think there's a lot of people who are like, oh no, it's just word of mouth and referral. And I'm like, you don't think they're checking you out online? Right, okay, let's have a look.
I want the referral on the digital channels. I want it on your Instagram feed. Yeah. I want it on your LinkedIn. I want it on your website. I want you to put those recommendations and reviews absolutely everywhere. I've got the 5 channels, referrals, email, social media, publishing and awards, and they all are designed to lead people to your website. So your website is the mother channel, obviously, and that goes back to what you were just saying about, the digital footprint or the digital presence. Yeah. You've got to have a website that speaks directly to the future clients that you wish to build a communication channel with. And so one of the biggest issues that I see with architecture websites is that they are designed to appeal and speak mainly to other architects, not to clients. They're not client-centric at all. And so, your question was, what would someone do? The biggest shift that you can make and the thing that's going to have the most profound impact is to figure out who you're talking to, who your future client is, and then frame your messaging for that particular either segment or group or customer.
And I think that's really important. And I think that's the bit that people don't do. I also like the part you said earlier about service pages. Service pages are like the untapped thing. Most architects don't have them. You can have one long service page. That's not great. But actually, if you could have a page for feasibility, a page for all of that, that is going to be what people are likely to be searching for. And I think that's what people don't realize is actually that's probably some of the biggest ways of getting commercial search terms onto your website. People who are ready to buy is having those service pages. And yet so many people don't have them at all on their website at all.
Yes, absolutely.
But no, I completely agree about writing to an actual customer. And yeah, because the amount of sites I'm like, I have no idea who it is for. I have no idea, and it's literally they are talking to their peers, which I think is a massive issue.
Yeah, sometimes you can't even work out where they're located to know if they're around the corner for you and, a good fit geographically. So...
Oh, yeah. Okay. Some practices actually don't even say they're an architecture practice, which also drives me nuts.
It's true. Anyway,
thank you so much for coming onto the show, Rachel. I've really enjoyed having you.
Thanks, Io. It's been great.
Where's the best place for people to find you?
My website, soundslikedesign.com.au.
Fantastic. And I will put links into your quiz and also links to your newsletter as well so that people can read it. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. Take care. Bye.
See ya.
Thanks so much for listening to the Built Environment Marketing Show. Don't forget to check out the show notes, which will have useful links and resources connected to this episode. You can find that on abasmarketing.com. And of course, if you like the show, please do share it with others on social, as it helps more people to find us. See you soon.